Here we have a photograph of an abandoned factory building that I took when I was on a residency in Leipzig, Germany. It meets all 4 criteria for being laser friendly. 1. High resolution. Come up to image and image size and we'll be able to see the resolution of the image. It's 300 ppi and has large pixel dimensions of 6,728 by 8,410. This means that we can actually engrave this quite large if we want to. This photograph was taken with a good but not fancy digital camera before I had a smartphone, because I was the last person in the world to get a smartphone. 2, it contains a variety of colors, and it has the added advantage that the factory building, the focal point, is a different color from what's behind it. This means that we'll be able to tweak the image and potentially give the focal point more definition. 3, it contains a range of values from dark to light without too many highlights or too many shadows or near blacks. The area of the photo that's going to be the most challenging is in the shadow of the tree and some of these highlights. Anytime you have subtle variation within the highest lights or the darkest darks, the laser is going to have a hard time seeing them and it's most likely going to merge them together. So we need to bring out more definition in the shadow of the tree for it not to engrave as a solid mass. 4. Contrast. This image has good contrast and clarity to start with, and this is going to be something that we are going to enhance even more in our adjustments so that we get better detail in the laser engraving process. We're going to use 3 primary adjustments: the camera raw filter, a black and white adjustment layer, and the unsharp mask. Now let's start. Come to the layers panel, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this layer. That way we save it in its original form just in case anything goes awry. We can duplicate in one of 2 ways. We can use the keyboard shortcut Control-J or Command-J on a Mac, or with the layer selected, right-click and hit duplicate. And let's label this adjustment layer. Okay, so we're going to do everything to this image in the adjustment layer. And we're going to do it by making it a smart object, by right-clicking and choosing Convert to Smart Object. Making adjustments in a Smart Object layer allows us to make those adjustments without permanently changing the original image. It's a non-destructive way of working. It also allows us to go back to filters after we've made adjustments and tweak them. The first adjustment that we're going to make is we're going to invert this image because we're working on photo wood blocks. We need to work in the negative. Now, photos are easier to adjust when they're in the positive, but what I have found is when I adjust them in the positive and then invert them later, I still need to make additional adjustments because the inversion of the positive is not necessarily laser friendly. Come up to Image, Adjustments, and Invert. From this point forward, we're going to have to think a little bit backwards, which is challenging, but we can do it. The next adjustment we're going to make is in the Camera Raw filter. Come up to Filters, Camera Raw. Camera Raw is awesome because it allows us to make targeted adjustments that are actually finer adjustments than we can make using other tools in Photoshop. Something that you might want to do to start with is in this first box on the left-hand side, go down to the bottom and click on that square. And that's going to give us a before and after view. Coming over to the dialog box on the right, we're going to work primarily in this basic tab. So there are all sorts of things that we can shift, but this basic will give us a lot of information. We'll start by scrolling down to clarity, and we want to up the clarity. Clarity increases the definition between pixels both with color and luminosity. It's changing the definition of pixels versus the contrast up here, which is changing the contrast between larger aspects of the composition. And we'll start by bringing it up. Notice that as we bring it up, it gets darker. So depending on the image, I'm probably going to go kind of middle position here. This is where the process is challenging because everything is based on a specific photo. There's kind of no one clarity number that I can give you that will work for everything. Next, we're going to adjust the highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. Because remember, any place that is close to white, so let's say look in this shadow area of the trees or close to black, is going to be problematic for the laser. So we want to lighten our darks and darken our lights. Of course, we're working at the inverted image here. So let's start with highlights and see what happens. And anytime you got a slider, just play going back and forth and just seeing what the difference is. I'm going to bring this all the way down. One of the things that I've found in working with negative images versus positive images is when I work with the negative or the inverted image, I'm actually making more dramatic changes than if I was working with a positive image and doing a positive engraving. Let's see what happens next when they do whites. I'm going to bring that down. And you'll notice what's happening is because I'm making such dramatic changes, I am kind of losing in some ways the overall contrast of the image. It's becoming a little bit more low contrast, but I'm going to risk that for now. I'm going to return this view that we have in the left-hand box to just seeing the current view, so single view. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, Control plus, Command plus on a Mac. So that you can see these changes a little better. Come into shadows, and we are going to lighten our shadows because we want to get away from anything that's real black. So just kind of looking at what's happening, particularly in this center area with these bricks. What's happening as I bring the slider up and I bring the slider down. We're going to go all the way up. So areas that are going to be problematic are these darks in here. Let's see what happens when we adjust the black. And notice that it is affecting, it's also blowing out this black, some of the values that we got in the tree. So I actually don't want to go there. That's really lightening up, like it's lightening up that dark really well, but it's lightening up other things too much. So I'm going to kind of come down more to a middle position with the blacks because I don't want to completely lose all the great work that we did in the tree. All right, we're going to hit OK, and we're going to go with these results. And the beauty of doing this as a smart object is that we can go to the eye next to the camera raw filter layer and click it off, and we can toggle back and forth between the two so that we can see what has happened. The next adjustment we're going to make is we're going to create a black and white adjustment layer. So anytime we create an adjustment layer, it is a non-destructive way of making changes. Come down to the bottom of the layers box to the circle that's half white, half black, and choose black and white. Now, this is why we are working with color images, because it is easier to make targeted adjustments using this black and white adjustment layer than it is working with curves or another method. So let's start by playing with the red slider. As with any of these sliders, go up and down just so you can kind of see what the options and variations are. It might be tempted to bring the red slider all the way down to go towards black because you want the sky to be light. So having areas that are solid black or near solid black are a little bit tricky because the laser isn't going to be putting a halftone dot, it's going to be just removing that area as a fill. So some things to think about. If the area of black is large, you're going to want to ink it up with a brayer that is wider than your block. If you use a smaller brayer, you're more likely to get lap lines. Engraving a solid area may bring out the grain in a beautiful way, depending on the type of wood that you're using, or it might bring out the grain in a way that is kind of visually distracting or less desirable. And if your resolution is lower, you could end up with seeing the striations of the laser that's going back and forth in the graving process. I'm going to make my decision based on those three factors. I don't have a brayer that's large enough, and I know from experience that I will get lap lines in the sky. I'm using Baltic birch, which unlike cherry or maple that does actually have kind of a more interesting grain, the grain is less desirable. And I'm also going to be using a lower LPI or lines per inch because I'm impatient and I don't want to wait for a higher resolution image to engrave. based on those three factors, I'm actually going to bring the value up so that it's lighter, so that I will get some halftone dots in there. And this is just going to be less visually distracting than if I bring it down and remove too much information. And now let's play with the yellows. So when we move the yellow back and forth, it's really primarily affecting the sky. And I'm going to bring it not super light. All right, we're going to keep it there for now. We might come back to that. Now let's look at greens. All right, look at the center of the composition where the graffiti is, and that's where my greens are. I'm going to bring them up so that they are lighter than the surrounding area. So if I bring them down, they're similar in value to other things that are there, and so I'm not going to see as much variation and difference. And so I'm going to bring them up. Let's bring them up to about there. And that's just going to give us more variation in the graffiti in this section. In general, you kind of want to have different areas next to each other of different values. Again, that's going to help bring us clarity and distinction. Now for the cyans. And let's bring these. Okay, so the cyans are really affecting the building itself. And if I bring it down, we're going darker. And of course, you know me, I'm a little wary of darker. And if we bring them up, they're getting super light. So one of the advantages of lighter is that I will kind of get more detail in the specificity of those bricks. So I don't know, let's do this for now and we'll see. Okay, it's a little too light, I know that. But that's because I also know that what is controlling the color of that factor is also the blue. So let's bring the blue down. Let's play with the magenta a little bit. Going back and forth, seeing where the magenta is. Okay, so the magenta is in the trees, and look at the vegetation on the bottom. So it's helping to bring clarity and distinction into what's happening at the bottom. So it's too high, it's going to be very similar, low contrast in value. If I bring it down, we're getting more variation and different types of values in that area, which will help bring us more clarity. All right, I want to play with these blues a little bit more. Let's see what happens if I bring this blue up. All right, we're going to bring it about there. Okay, it's too pale. Okay, let's play with this cyan just a little bit more. All right, so if I go down here, okay, and where do I want to be here? If I go up here, that's really kind of blowing it out. And let's try about there. I think we're going to go with this. So the black and white adjustment layer is really where the artistry of this process comes in. There are multiple solutions to how you could be making these adjustments based on the visual quality that you want in the print that may be different from the original photograph. Now we'll come back to the layers panel, and we're going to click on adjustment layer, and we're going to make our final adjustment, which is to sharpen the image up. Click on filter, sharpen, and unsharp mask. The unmasked sharpen filter adjusts the image by adjusting the pixel color and brightness. So we're working on a pixel to pixel basis here. We've got three adjustments that we're making: the amount, the radius, and the threshold. And we'll start here in threshold. When the threshold is higher, it is looking at larger pixel groupings. When it is lower, it is looking more pixel to pixel. We want it to be looking at the micro more than we want it to be looking at the macro. We want these images to look very sharp, and here is where it can be really challenging, because what you're going to see on screen is not going to necessarily look visually appealing, but how it translates to the laser is the laser will actually be able to make us a better representation when it is reading a sharper image than when it is reading something that is has more subtle shifts that looks good on the screen. Next, we have the radius, and the radius determines the number of neighboring pixels that will be affected. More is going to sharpen, and less is going to make smoother. And again, here it's very tempting to want to go less and get these nice subtle gradations, but we really want a sharper image. And the amount adjusts the pixel color and brightness. And if we lower the amount, it's making less adjustments, and if we increase the amount, it's making more adjustments. Now, how to make these adjustments. And this is a little bit of a trial and error and aspect that you will kind of learn to see like the laser cutter. The more of these files that you make and engrave, see what the results of, and going back and forth into this process. So that you have an idea of kind of how the amount and radius kind of work, I've done two examples here. So for the first one I have here, the radius is kind of in the middle position and the amount is higher. So this gives us a sharper, higher contrast image. So when it's printing, I kind of like what's happening in the architecture, kind of the crispness that's happening, but it is this overall crispness that loses kind of any atmospheric sense of depth. In this second example, the amount is in the middle position and the radius is higher. So we're getting the sharpness with some of those tonal subtleties as well. And when this is printed, we are getting, again, something that has sharpness but also has that atmospheric effect. In general, I'm going to suggest that you kind of keep the amount kind of in the middle and increase the radius. Now, of course, this isn't true for absolutely every photograph you do. I'm going to show you an example in the next video where I actually have the radius and amount close together because that's what works for that image. The unsharp mask filter, I do, at least at the beginning, suggest that you go for something that is sharper than you actually think is aesthetically pleasing. And then through the process of adjusting photos, printing them, seeing kind of how they look, you'll get a better idea of how to think like the laser cutter. Now that we're finished adjusting the image, I'm going to go to File and Save As. And I'm going to label this Factory Adjusted. I'm going to put video here. This is one of the video examples. So when you're saving your image, save it as a TIFF, not as a Photoshop file or PSD. Some laser cutters have a hard time reading PSDs. If you're on a Glowforge, you'll save it as a PDF. Before you jump to the next video, post your #1 takeaway. What gets written gets remembered.